The conflict in Ukraine has become one of the most devastating military events in modern history, with human casualties reaching alarming levels. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, the number of Russian soldiers killed in the first year of the conflict has exceeded the total number of Russian casualties in all wars since World War II. With monthly casualties ranging from 5,000 to 5,800 soldiers, this fact not only shows the intensity of the fighting, but also raises many questions about the accuracy of official reports. Newly declassified US intelligence reports reveal that Russian military losses in Ukraine have exceeded previous estimates by around 400%. The assessment suggests that as many as 315,000 Russian soldiers were killed or wounded, representing nearly 90% of the total forces Moscow deployed at the start of the conflict. Losses have continued to mount throughout 2024, with figures from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense showing that the Russian military suffered 490 casualties in that year alone. Notably, the months of November and December 2024 saw the highest losses, with 45,720 and 48,070 casualty, respectively. The discrepancy in casualty estimates is deeply unsettling, highlighting the scale of loss and the difficulty of grasping the true human cost of the war. Sources vary dramatically in their assessments, with US intelligence estimating Russian casualties at a staggering 315,000, while the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense places the figure even higher at 430,790. In contrast, independent media outlets like Mediazona have painstakingly verified around 88,000 casualties, including a heart-wrenching 31,000 just in 2024 alone. These figures reflect not only the staggering toll on human lives, but also the profound emotional and social consequences that are difficult to fully comprehend. To track and assess Russia's losses, intelligence organizations have used a variety of methods, including analysis of satellite imagery of battlefield activities, intercepted military communications, social media monitoring, reports from observers on the ground, and analysis of equipment damage patterns. Independent verification efforts, such as Mediazona's focus on documenting individual casualties, cross-referencing them with public sources such as obituaries, social media posts, and local government announcements. These findings suggest that official Russian reports routinely understate the actual figures, admitting only about 3 casualties more than the actual number. To ensure accuracy, both Western and Ukrainian intelligence agencies use multiple layers of verification, including satellite imagery and reports from independent observers. The impact of these losses on Russia's military capabilities is severe. US intelligence estimates that the casualties, combined with the loss of equipment, have set back the modernization of the Russian military by about 18 years. This has forced Moscow to take extraordinary measures, including lowering recruitment standards and deploying aging civilians to fill the gaps. In addition to these challenges, the regional distribution of Russian military losses has shown marked differences between territories, with some regions bearing disproportionately high casualties. The regional distribution of Russian military losses has shown marked differences between territories, with some regions bearing disproportionately high casualties. Recent data indicate a dramatic shift in the geographic distribution of losses throughout the conflict. The regions of Bashkortostan and Tatarstan have been the hardest hit, with each region losing nearly 2,000 residents in 2024 alone. The Urals, which primarily include Perm-Krai, Sverdlovsk, and Chelyabinsk, have also suffered significant casualties. A striking pattern of ethnic and regional representation in the casualty figures has emerged, with men from the far north, northeast, and Siberia making up a higher proportion of the total casualties. Minorities such as the Buryat, Kalmyk, Tuvan, Chukchi, and Nenets also suffered above-average casualties. A breakdown of losses across the armed forces shows a marked variation across units. Of the total 88,055 Russian soldiers killed, units such as the Russian airborne troops accounted for 6% or 3%, while tank and motorized troops accounted for 6%, 5%, and 8% respectively. In particular, conscripts from prisons accounted for 17%, 3%, or 15%. With the number of casualties rising, Russia's regions are facing significant recruitment challenges. Despite the Russian military's increased signing bonuses, daily recruitment rates have fallen to around 600 contract soldiers in the third quarter of 2024. This is all the more worrying given that daily casualties reached 1,123 in November. economic differentiation has emerged as a prominent factor in recruitment patterns. The study found that economically underdeveloped regions in Siberia and the Russian Far East have seen the highest death rates, while Moscow and St. Petersburg have maintained the lowest casualty rates. However, these regional disparities are largely driven by social and economic inequality rather than ethnic factors. The recruitment crisis has forced regions to adopt alternative methods, including seeking military resources from foreign countries to meet their quotas. Although foreign troops make up only a small portion of the total force, they bring economic advantages because they do not affect the domestic workforce. The stark discrepancy between Russia's official casualty figures and independent assessments paints a complex picture of Russia's military losses in Ukraine. The discrepancy illustrates the challenges of accurately determining the true extent of Russian military casualties. The Russian Ministry of Defense has kept its estimates relatively conservative throughout the conflict. In September 2020, Moscow officially acknowledged that only 5,037 Russian soldiers had been killed. However, this figure is at odds with assessments from other sources, as Russian authorities have consistently downplayed military losses and refrained from publicly disclosing information about casualties. The US Department of Defense also has its own assessment, according to which Russia's casualties have exceeded 600,000, including both deaths and injuries. This marks the highest military loss suffered by an industrialized nation in a single conflict since World War II. These staggering figures highlight the severe toll the war has taken on Russia's military and further underscore the broader impact on its capabilities. The extensive losses sustained by Russian forces have fundamentally altered their military capabilities. Currently, the Russian military operates with approximately 410,000 troops in Ukraine. Despite facing substantial operational challenges, one of the most significant consequences of these heavy casualties has been the loss of experienced personnel, which has had a direct effect on the military's overall effectiveness and its ability to conduct sustained operations. The depletion of seasoned soldiers has left Russia reliant on newly recruited, less trained forces, further exacerbating the operational difficulties it faces. Throughout the war, the quality of Russian military personnel has deteriorated markedly. Units are typically rotated out after sustaining 30% casualties, at which point they are deemed ineffective. As a result, the Russian military has increasingly relied on deploying forces with minimal training, using basic tactics despite the associated high casualty rates. The scale of equipment destruction has been another critical issue. Since the onset of the conflict, Russia has suffered significant losses in key military assets. As of 2024, confirmed losses include 3,890 tanks, 8,800 armored vehicles, and 13,000 pieces of artillery. These figures have forced Russia to reactivate older equipment to maintain its operational capacity. Despite these challenges, Russian forces have managed to deliver approximately 100 tanks monthly to the front lines, maintaining a steady, albeit reduced, operational tempo. This loss of personnel and equipment has resulted in a significant reduction in combat effectiveness across several critical areas. While Russia has attempted to adapt by incorporating Western weapons systems, the force quality issues persist. Moreover, the military has struggled with scaling offensive operations effectively and has been limited in its capacity for combined arms operations beyond the company level. These factors have significantly hindered Russia's ability to conduct large-scale, effective military operations. Despite these setbacks, Russia has demonstrated resilience in maintaining battlefield pressure. The military has shown an ability to absorb losses and fill gaps with new recruits, and its industrial base continues to produce enough equipment to sustain operations. Monthly reactivation rates for key equipment include 100 to 110 main battle tanks, 200 to 210 infantry fighting vehicles, and approximately 230 various armored vehicles annually. However, the Russian military-industrial complex faces severe limitations, and projections indicate that by 2026, most available equipment stocks will be exhausted. The situation is particularly critical concerning ammunition supplies, with Russia drawing down its remaining 3 million rounds, much of which remains in poor condition. Ultimately, despite these efforts to sustain operations, the Russian military struggles with basic force quality issues and is unable to translate its material advantages into operationally significant gains. The net effect has been incremental territorial gains at a substantial cost. As Russian forces prove unable to achieve breakthrough operations, even when possessing quantitative advantages in manpower and material. This inability to leverage its resources effectively is compounded by a growing demographic crisis within the Russian military. Recent demographic data reveals an unprecedented surge in mortality rates among Russian military personnel, creating a severe crisis that threatens the future of Russia's armed forces. In 2024, the mortality rate among young men has nearly doubled compared to pre-war levels, exacerbating the challenges Russia faces in maintaining a capable military force. This demographic shift, combined with ongoing losses, is undermining Russia's long-term military sustainability, making it increasingly difficult to overcome the force quality issues that have hindered their operational success. The age distribution of Russian military losses shows a concerning pattern. Men aged 35-39 have suffered the highest casualties, with approximately 17,000 excess deaths recorded in this age group. Additionally, the mortality rate among 25-29-year-old men has increased by nearly 100% compared to expected levels, indicating a dramatic rise in the number of young soldiers killed or wounded. Even younger age groups, such as those between 18 to 24, have experienced significant losses, further compounding the crisis. The depletion of recruitment pools has reached critical levels, as the available manpower has diminished substantially. By December 2023, the number of prison inmates available for recruitment had dropped by 105,000, bringing the total to just 249,000. Moreover, poorer regions and economically disadvantaged populations, which have traditionally been primary sources of recruits, are showing signs of exhaustion. Monthly personnel losses of approximately 30,000 soldiers match the current recruitment rate, making it increasingly difficult to maintain the necessary force levels. In response, the Russian military has set a goal of increasing its manpower by 350,000 to reach 1.5 million personnel. But this objective faces significant obstacles. As recruitment challenges intensify, the military has resorted to extraordinary measures, such as raising the conscription age from 18 to 27 to 18-30 years. The long-term implications of these losses extend far beyond immediate military capabilities. The Russian armed forces now face multiple challenges, particularly about combat trauma and force generation. It is estimated that around 500,000 veterans may develop post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which will not only lower employment rates among traumatized veterans, but also place a strain on government resources dedicated to mental health care. The rising demand for mental health services will undoubtedly create substantial budget pressures for the Russian government. Additionally, the loss of experienced troops will have lasting effects on military capabilities for years to come. The current casualty rates of approximately 1,200 soldiers daily severely impact force sustainability. To maintain operations in the territories Russia claims, the military will require between 1.5 to 1.8 million replacements over the next 5 years. This loss of manpower, compounded by the challenges of replenishing it, has led to a lost generation effect, with Chief of the British Army Sir Roland Walker remarking that there are no winners in this situation. As the conflict drags on, signs of increasing deterioration within the Russian military machine become more evident, highlighting the significant challenges Russia will face in the years to come. First and foremost, a variety of verification methods have been employed to track Russian military losses in Ukraine, combining advanced technology with traditional intelligence gathering techniques. The Pentagon, for example, utilizes a diverse range of sources to estimate casualties, including satellite imagery, communication intercepts, and news reports, providing a multifaceted approach to understanding the scale of Russian losses. Satellite imagery analysis has proven to be a particularly valuable tool in documenting Russian casualties. Maxa Technologies, a private US-based satellite company, has provided crucial evidence of expanding military cemeteries near Russian bases. These satellite images not only reveal cemetery locations, but also offer insights into which military units are associated with specific sites. For instance, cemetery locations such as Bogorodskoye have been linked to the 106th Guards Airborne Division, while others like Tula are connected to the Guards Motorized Division. In April 2023, satellite imagery showed new grid patterns indicating additional grave sites, providing further evidence of growing military casualties. Furthermore, satellite analysis has documented substantial equipment losses, with over 109 destroyed Russian vehicles identified in a single 10-day period near Avdiivka. In addition to satellite imagery, social media verification plays a significant role in tracking Russian losses. Independent organizations have developed stringent methodologies to cross-check casualty reports from social media platforms. MediaZona, for example, uses a combination of official publications from government websites, social media posts from relatives, regional media reports, local messaging group communications, and cemetery documentation to verify Russian military losses. Social media has proven particularly effective in tracking casualties, as the relatives of Russian soldiers frequently share information about fallen soldiers, providing valuable insights into the true scale of the conflict's toll. Independent observer reports further complement these verification efforts. MOLFA, a specialized investigation group, supplies an average of 15 actionable intelligence reports monthly to Ukrainian intelligence services. Their methodology combines corporate investigation techniques, open-source intelligence, OSINT, digital verification processes, and satellite imagery analysis. OSINT has become an increasingly vital tool in tracking Russian losses, offering insights into both equipment losses and troop movements. However, OSINT practitioners maintain high standards of evidence, focusing only on verifiable data to ensure accuracy. The combination of these advanced verification methods has produced substantial evidence of Russian losses. For instance, the BBC Russian service, working alongside MediaZona, has identified 74,014 confirmed Russian military deaths through official reports, online obituaries, and images of tombstones. Based on this data, the actual figure is estimated to range between 113,000 and 160,000 deaths. Despite the Russian government's efforts to restrict information related to military casualties, independent verification continues to reveal the true scale of losses. Through innovative methods such as satellite imagery, social media verification, and independent observer reports, crucial evidence of Russian fatalities and equipment losses has been documented. These ongoing efforts ensure that the extent of Russia's military setbacks remains visible despite government suppression. This situation highlights the broader impact of the Ukraine conflict on modern warfare. The scale of Russian losses has fundamentally altered expectations for military casualties, redefining what is possible in terms of both manpower and material depletion. Historical comparisons, such as the Soviet-Afghan War or the Chechen Wars, fall short in capturing the intensity and sustained nature of the current crisis. The casualty rates, technological advancements, and relentless operational tempo have elevated this conflict to a level not seen in modern history. One of the most striking comparisons is with the Soviet-Afghan War, a conflict that lasted from 1979 to 1988. In terms of casualty figures, Russian losses in Ukraine have already reached levels that exceeded the entire decade-long Soviet campaign in Afghanistan. Russian forces are now suffering monthly casualties that are 35 times higher than the Soviet-Afghan War's average of 145 soldiers per month. Furthermore, the losses in Ukraine are 25 times greater than those sustained during the First Chechen War, a stark reminder of the exceptional scale of this conflict. When examining Russian casualties through a broader post-World War II lens, the situation becomes even more pronounced. The cumulative casualties from other significant post-World II conflicts, including Korea, Georgia, Syria, and Angola, totaled around 50,000 soldiers. The two Chechen wars resulted in 14,000 and 6,029 casualties, respectively. By comparison, Russian forces in Ukraine are now experiencing monthly casualties in the range of 5,000 to 5,800, representing a rate that has already surpassed the total casualties from many of these previous engagements. This unprecedented level of attrition in Ukraine signals a profound change in the patterns of modern warfare. Technological advancements, such as drone warfare, precision artillery strikes, and enhanced surveillance, have contributed to a casualty rate far higher than seen in past conflicts. The operational tempo has also been relentless, with daily casualty rates averaging around 200 soldiers. The intensity of combat operations and the continuous recruitment needs, averaging 25,000 to 30,000 soldiers per month, are reflective of the extraordinary demands placed on Russia's military. The high attrition rates and the associated challenges have forced Russia to adopt strategies that reflect a grim historical precedent. similar to the Soviet Union's approach during World War II, where mass casualties were accepted as part of the larger war effort. Russia has appeared to prioritize territorial gains over the preservation of its troops. However, unlike the meat grinder tactics of the past, the scale of current losses is proving unsustainable. As the war continues, the Russian military faces an unprecedented crisis in both manpower and morale, unable to fully compensate for the staggering number of casualties. Ultimately, the conflict in Ukraine represents a turning point in the history of modern warfare, where the intensity of combat, the rapid depletion of personnel, and the technological advancements of the battlefield have converged to create a casualty rate that would have been considered catastrophic by historical standards. As Russian forces continue to endure these losses, the future of Russia's military capabilities remains uncertain. The Russian military is confronting unparalleled strategic challenges as it attempts to maintain combat effectiveness during the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Currently, the Russian operational group of forces, with approximately 470,000 troops stationed in occupied territories, is facing severe difficulties in sustaining its war effort across multiple fronts. To address these challenges, the Russian Ministry of Defense has focused on three main force generation objectives: immediate battlefield requirements, medium-term force restoration, and long-term restructuring aimed at preparing for a potential confrontation with NATO. However, the military's approach to reconstitution largely relies on creating new formations to replace lost units, rather than rebuilding the existing ones. This has led to an inflated number of formations on paper, with many units that were destroyed or significantly degraded still officially listed, despite lacking the combat power to carry out operations effectively. Throughout 2024, Russian forces have maintained a steady deployment rate, rotating units out after sustaining 30% casualties. While this strategy has allowed for a continuous presence on the battlefield, it has resulted in reconstituted forces that demonstrate diminished capabilities. The reduced effectiveness of these units can be attributed to several factors, including leadership losses that undermine unit cohesion, equipment shortages that limit operational capacity, training deficiencies that reduce combat effectiveness, and integration issues that lead to poor coordination among units. Operational tempo has remained a central focus of the Russian command. They have adapted by establishing training regiments along borders, standardizing units after the mutiny of the Wagner Group, and implementing rotation systems for the degraded units. However, despite these efforts, Russian forces continue to struggle with translating tactical successes into meaningful operational gains. Throughout the conflict, Russian formations have primarily deployed individual units at the company or battalion level, operating on an ad hoc basis at the front lines. The limitations of the Russian military-industrial complex further exacerbate the difficulties in sustaining operations. For example, the production of key munitions in 2024 has fallen short of requirements, with the Ministry of Defense reporting the production of 3,152-meter artillery rounds and 800,000 122-meter artillery rounds. This is significantly below the 4,152mm and 6,122mm artillery rounds the Russian military needs to make substantial territorial gains. Additionally, vehicle stocks are expected to be exhausted by 2026, further highlighting the logistical strain faced by the Russian military. In terms of personnel, the Russian recruitment system has been able to meet approximately 85% of its contracting targets. However, this has resulted in the replenishment of forces with poorly trained recruits, further undermining the overall effectiveness of the military. The Kremlin is relying on the continued ability to sustain attrition rates through 2025, though it remains uncertain whether this strategy will prove successful in the long run. To address these shortfalls, the Russian military has organized its forces into two main groupings: the central grouping of forces, which is focused on seizing Avdiivka, and the western grouping of forces, which operates along the Kharkiv-Luhansk axis. These groupings reflect Russia's adaptations to the battlefield, including an increased reliance on armored vehicles for infantry transport, enhanced coordination between units, and modified tactical approaches. The Russian command believes that offensive operations in late April could set the stage for a larger offensive that may collapse the Ukrainian front line, capitalizing on Ukrainian material constraints and delays in Western security assistance. In conclusion, while the Russian military continues to adapt to its challenging circumstances, the long-term sustainability of its offensive capabilities remains in question. The persistent strain on personnel, equipment, and strategic coherence could ultimately shape the future of the conflict. With the war effort becoming increasingly difficult to sustain, it raises the question of how much longer Russia can maintain its current operational tempo before the pressure becomes insurmountable. What do you think will be the key factors determining the outcome of this prolonged conflict?